Once again, I went into this episode with low expectations, but also I wanted to be open-minded about One Punch Man Season 2. If you watched my first impressions of Season 2, and if you've been watching my overall impressions of the trailers, the information that came out, then you know my overall opinion of Season 2. Now, just because, it had a staff change and, it's a new studio doesn't mean that I automatically want to hate on Season 2. In fact, like I said last week, One Punch Man Season 2 Episode 1 was pretty good. It had some CGI that was kind of but overall, it was a really good episode. It was a strong start. If we never saw Season 1, Season 2's beginning would absolutely be amazing. It is still a standout from this anime season, so I will give it that. Now, Episode 2 of One Punch Man Season 2 is once again, in my personal opinion, another good episode. It's solid. Now, there is some problems, which I will get into, but it is still a very strong and solid episode. And I just want to remind everyone, because I know people tend to forget, not everybody watches every video I upload, so just want to remind anyone that's, tuning in for the first time watching my One Punch Man videos, the reason why this will never look as good as Season 1 is not because it's JC staff, it's just because the director of, the first season was just so good, called in so many favors, there's just no way we'll ever have the quality of Season 1. So, we should expect that. Now, anyways, let's talk about what this episode did, or why some might be a little bit concerned, or why it is concerning. Now, I know I've already said that this is a good episode, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, but there's a few things that do need to be pointed out to why it is concerning. Number one, it was revealed that there was 5 chief animation directors working on this episode. That right there is absolutely scary. There's normally only one, or there's supposed to be only one chief animation director, and when there is 5 there to work on episode 2, that's bad. That shows that they had to bring in a lot of people just to get this episode finished. That's bad. That means that they're behind schedule, and there's just a lot of problems going on in production-wise. And this is scary, because for the second episode to have this much, work done on it, so many chief directors and stuff working on it, I can't even begin to imagine how the later episodes are going to be. To bring in just 5 for episode 2, imagine, the really serious and important fights. So, what I'm trying to say is that there is some underlying production issues going on. And at this moment, looking at this episode, you don't really see it. You obviously, when you watch this episode, it looks like a decent episode. It is a decent episode. And many might just completely glance over. It's like, okay, this is acceptable. But like I said, 5 chief animation directors being on episode 2 alone reeks of production issues, and things are going to get very dicey as the season progresses. Maybe around episode 6, 5, whatever, we might really start to see problems around episode 4, since from what I'm hearing, they had the first 3 episodes kind of mostly finished before it finally started to air this season. So, we'll see around probably 4 or 5, maybe 6, when, the production issues and where it's going to go. But, getting right into it though, this episode is decent, okay? I know it looks like I'm ranting on it, but I do want to commend the work that was put into this episode. Even if it is not the standards of Season 1, which it never will be, it's a good episode, because there is some good scenes, especially the Geno scene versus Sonic in this episode, seeing how he went up against him and the way the frames are done. It wasn't the best I've ever seen, best fighting scene, not just from One Punch Man, but from any series, but it was a really good action sequence. And for them to have that amount of detail in the second episode, I'm pretty impressed. I will give JC staff that, and the entire staff that was working on this episode, even though they had to call in 5 chief animation directors, it still was a good episode. So, I will give points where points are due. It was decent. Now, a few things. In terms of adaptation, honestly, I don't remember. I remember I read up to this point in the manga, and I don't remember all of the nitty-gritty little details of the manga, and so I don't know if this episode perfectly adapted the content from the manga. So if anyone that has One Punch Man fresh in their mind, or if you have bought the volumes and you have them, let's say, in your personal library, pull them out, let me know how this adaptation was for this episode in terms of adapting the content from the manga. But, okay, let's talk about what this episode is about, and then I want to get into what the bad was of this episode. So, Fubuki. you have Blizzard that was introduced in this episode. Well, she was kind of introduced in Season 1, but she was officially introduced in Season 2. And we get a little bit more about her character. She is someone that is on the top of the B-class heroes. She's rank 1, and she's someone that holds the ultimate title. For instance, to be able to really pass her, you gotta, overcome her and deal with her noob crushing that she constantly does. And so, obviously, because of how she is, she set her sights on Saitama because he entered the B-class heroes, and, she's wanting to make sure he stops, where, he might join her party instead of trying to be an obstacle to her or just jump over her and be a problem. She wants him a part of her group. And obviously, we know Saitama, that's not going to really work out too well, which led to kind of the major conflict of this episode, which Saitama dealt with pretty freaking quickly. So Blizzard as a character. Honestly, out of the two sisters, the older sister, which is Tatsumaki, and then Fubuki that was introduced in this episode, I've always been a bigger fan of Fubuki. I've always loved her character. It's not just because of her appearance, obviously, which, by the way, if there's one thing JC staff and the people that were doing when they were working on this episode, they spent that extra quality and detail working on, Fubuki's chest area. I mean, just look at this scene and go back in the episode and they literally add a boing. And I'm just like, are you serious right now? But jokes aside though, Fubuki's always been one of my personal favorites, at least out of the two sisters. And I think she has a lot of potential to grow. Now, I don't know exactly where her character is going to go in the manga, because obviously I've never read it, but I'm just going to say I do like her character. And so, seeing her finally introduced in the anime, hearing her voice actor, and seeing how she might play a very big role in this season, I am looking forward to it. And this episode is mostly spent on that, just her character being introduced. And Saitama, obviously because of how he is, he's someone that doesn't really look at titles. He doesn't look at, hero titles like S-class hero, A-class hero, B-class hero. He doesn't care. He just fits in with everyone. And it's even stated at the end of this episode, because of his personality, he attracts the strong around him. For instance, S-class heroes and stuff like, Genos, King, even though we know King isn't strong, but he always attracts, like, big-name people. And Fubuki's like, I want to join his group, which is kind of like a reversal to what she was doing at the beginning of the episode. She wanted Saitama to join her group, but then she turned around and was like, you know what, I want to join his group, which is kind of adorable in a way. And I'm just going to be honest here, if there's any type of romance or ship in this series, I would ship Fubuki and Saitama together. That's just how much I love their characters. But anyways, we also have the conflict with Sonic and Genos. Now, Sonic as a character, we know he was introduced in Season 1. He had a brief encounter with Saitama where his family jewels got a little bit crunched. And it didn't turn out too well for the man, okay? And seeing how he's constantly had this rivalry with Saitama, or Saitama doesn't really see him as a rival, but, he has a rivalry with Saitama and he wants to prove himself. We see in a brief moment where he faces Saitama. Before that happens, though, he has to fight Genos. And overall, looking at the two individuals, Genos and Sonic are very equal. In terms of strength level, Sonic does have the speed, but Genos has the raw power. And as the fight continues, it's very apparent that because of Sonic's speed, he could still probably defeat Genos. Genos still has a long way to go before he's probably even able to fight someone like Sonic. But it's funny to see Sonic spent so much time trying to do like his after images, and he was going super fast, and then just seeing Saitama jump side to side and all that real quickly, and he just annihilates, Sonic like it's nothing. It's pretty hilarious. And once again, it goes to show that no matter who you are, Saitama will always be number one and always will be stronger. He really showed his level compared to someone like Sonic. But yeah, that's pretty much the content of the episode, kind of like what it was about besides the Garo stuff, which I'll get into in just a second. But I think overall, from the scenes that was anime when it came to Fubuki and the Sonic stuff, it is exactly what I remember. And now I could be misremembering a few details, but it is what I remember, so I think the adaptation is doing pretty good. Now, for the Garo stuff, I believe they did cut out Garo's backstory. I could be wrong there, but I believe they cut out some details to his backstory, which could easily be added into the next episode, or when we find out a little bit more about Garo, which is fine, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But I believe that was removed from this episode. Now, speaking of Garo as an individual is a very unique character because he is someone that believes he's a monster. At the very least, he wants to be on the monster side, which is very different, because all the enemies that our characters have faced thus far, even Saitama, have been monsters. And seeing someone like Garo, which is straight up a human, wanting to work with the monsters, you're like, what drove you to be like that? What drove you to want to side with monsters and help them out? That's a big question that everybody's going to get while watching this episode. And why would he put humanity at risk just to work with the monsters? And how do the monsters feel? Do the monsters even want to work with Garo? That's a big question too. But he does prove his strength. He's able to annihilate A-class heroes and all of those criminal thugs like nothing in pretty much an instant in this episode, which shows his strength level, his speed, his strength. He is someone that, is incredibly above majority of the heroes, and could potentially be in the realm of S-class if he was technically a hero. And so, it's scary. He's already at this level, and he really hasn't actually showed his full skill set. He states that after 6 months he will finally declare his actual level or whatever, and he'll come back in 6 months or whatever. So it shows that he still is like at the beginning point. Like he's at the starting location and he's trying to get stronger before he can do something. So will he be able to eventually rival someone like Genos or even Saitama himself? That is a major question. But yeah, Garo overall, I do like his character. I like his introduction in this episode. I think they handled it right. I can't wait to see more of him. So let's get into the bad. So there's a couple things I noticed throughout this episode, and that is a lot of still images, or a lot of ways to cut corners when it came to the lips. For instance, lip flaps. Now, just in case you don't understand what lip flaps are, it's when the characters, their mouths are moving. It's kind of like their face is not moving, but their mouth is moving. And this is something you see so often in anime. It's a very common thing. It happens all the time. I mean, you cannot tell me there's one episode that doesn't have something like this. And there was many areas of the episode to where JC staff completely hid the lip flaps. Like, they made it to where it didn't show the characters talking. It would cut over to a still image where a character looks like they're moving, but it's just the background moving in a static image of the character, and you hear audio in the background, which is from another character, which is very lazy. It's like cutting corners and not having to animate lip flaps. And if they're really going out of their way to kind of hide lip flaps this early on, that's scary. And that's why I pointed out the 5 chief animation directors, is that if they're already trying to cut corners with just lip flaps, I can't imagine later episodes. And that doesn't even begin to talk about, like I said, just the still frames. There is a lot of still frames in this episode, and they do try to go out of their way to hide it by having, like, images, like, this static image of a character not moving, but then they have a background moving, which basically kind of gives the illusion that there is movement going on, but there is just a lot of still frames and just movement of an image just like shaken or whatever that really just is shown throughout this episode. So there is just a lot of ways to cut corners with the animation, which I think on an average watch you're not going to notice, but if you're really paying close attention, you're going to notice it instantly. And I think many might say, but Chibi, you're nitpicking and all that. No, I'm not. I'm pointing it out. I love this episode, but it's very apparent. And as a reminder, I'm not expecting this to be at the level of Season 1. I'm not expecting that. Not even close. But when you're already having stuff like this that's cutting corners, it's scary. It really is. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts of this episode of One Punch Man Season 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.